Is it on? Dale. All right, good evening, everyone. Whoa. Thank you very much for all coming here. Thank you very much to our panel, moderators, Jennifer Wood for all your support, and thank you for coming here and to speak about our topics that are affecting our sport, how we can develop it, how can we improve it, and as we all know, we're all connected here. I had the privilege to be involved in show jumping, and I went to different countries around the world, countries where there's no international events, and on the other side, countries sitting at the top of the sport. I believe that sport changes lives. I'm a true passion of our sport, and your presence here, it's also a manifestation of how serious and important you take our sport. The objective for today is to have a discussion about the issues and topics that we all agree are affecting our sports. But more importantly, it's also to keep encouraging and supporting those that are really helping developing the sport in the right direction. So it's not about all negative. We need to be positive. We need to work together. This panel behind me, which I'm very proud and honored to have, are experts. They've been long years involved in these sports, but we also have new generations. We have to remember that young generations are only a small percentage of our sport, but it's 100% of our future. So we really need to focus on how do we develop the sport the right way, because how top sport is heading is going to impact directly in the development of the sport for that fan base who is looking up to us. And being a leader, it brings responsibility. So here today, we're going to discuss all the issues. The idea is to bring this discussion to the next level, to the level where we can have actual plans and decisions. The topics only about today involve high sport, topics such as CSI 5 stars, Nations Cup, officials, course designing, and the aspects of commercial and media aspects of the sport. Since we're all together here, we're all connected, it's important to remember where we come from. We have to go beyond individual goals. It's important to remember that this is not just the sport of short jumping, it's our sport, and we are all responsible to make it even better. Okay? We all had support, tutors, mentoring, that leg up that we all needed to start in our sport. We need to pay forward. We need to remember where we came. I know in an hour and a half, it's not going to be enough to cover in depth the sport of show jumping, but sure, it's a start, okay? So I want to thank you for being here. We have a great panel. We have great discussion. I encourage you also for the Q&A session, which I think is going to even improve. And one important statement here, this event is not affiliated with any organization or any federation whatsoever. It's for the sport and by the sport, okay? And just to finish my opening statement, I'm going to come with a phrase that I think that nails it down to this important event. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. All right, so thank you very much, and I may introduce now our moderators. Peter Doubleday has been the voice, where's Peter on the side? You are not Peter. Peter Doubleday has been the voice of the American show jumping for decades, and he's also at the helm as manager of 3 of the most prestigious shows in North America, the Pennsylvania National, the Royal Winter Fair, and Devon Horse Show, where he co-manages with David Disler. Peter has announced the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, 6 FEI World Cup show jumping finals, and at many of the top U.S. shows. He was the production coordinator and chief announcer at the 2010 Altec FEI World Equestrian Games, and is an international level show jumper judge. On my right, Stephen Wild. Born into an equestrian background, Stephen is the son of an ex-international show jumper and grew up surrounded by the greats of the day, from David Broom and John Whitaker to Harvey Smith. He has been a commentator at 3 Olympic and Paralympic Games, and he's the co-founder and director of Walt Hinckley Management Group, along with Douglas Hinckley, which specializes in event management, security, and media relation. Steve is also an international jumping judge. So, moderators, take the panel. Thank you very much, and enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Caesar. We're going to slide this out of the way.
We're going that way.
We have a panel, a star-powered panel here today. We're going to introduce the panel. We'd like to just mention they have been advised, again, through their statements, again, that is no hold bar, basically. We want them to be very honest. They don't have to be politically correct with their involvement in statements that we are going to bring up on all of our topics. If they start to ramble on, we're going to cut them off. So that's what the whole purpose of this thing, panel, for everybody to have a chance to speak and enjoy and so forth. We're going to introduce our panelists here today, an illustrious group, starting over by Stephen at the very right side, facing all of you. Gentleman originally from Argentina. He has represented Argentina in the World Equestrian Games, Pan American Games, Nations Cup competition, and shows out of the Stonehenge Stables up in New Jersey. And he is a trainer to the stars, Max Amaya.
Thank you, Max. Well then to Lucy Davis with the hot seat between McLean Ward and George Morris. Lucy, who's already been a big part of the US teams, of course, the team silver medal at the Rio Olympic Games, and following on from the team bronze at the World Equestrian Games in 2014. An illustrious career already, but still at 25 years of age. Lucy Davis.
And right to my right at the end of the table here, a gentleman who has designed courses from all of the major world stops, Olympic course designer in his home country of Rio, and also Pan American Games, World Cup finals, everything. He's done it all, and we'd like to introduce Olympic course designer Guilherme Jorge.
Well, I'm alongside, I'm delighted to say, Ian Miller joining us tonight, an icon in international show jumping. Of course, 10 appearances in the Olympics, includes silver in 2008 in Beijing. He's competed at 6 World Championships, 9 medals at the Pan Am Games, 12-time Canadian champion. He's done it all and he's still got lots more to do. Ladies and gentlemen, Ian Miller.
Almost in the center of the group, gentleman who really needs no introduction, and it says in my little bio here, he's the founding father of Hunt Seat Equitation. Well, that goes a long ways. He is a king, he's a legend, and he is known for everything in our world of sport, and we owe a lot to this gentleman for where we are today. Mr. George Morris.
Well, just in the second seat across from me is Leopoldo Palacios. Leopoldo, who has the honor of designing twice at the Olympic Games. He's a former show jumper, second vice president of the FEI, a co-founder of the Aachen School of Course Design, and who better to talk about course designing and much more with us today. He's designed Olympic Games, World Cup finals, Pan American Games, and much more besides. Ladies and gentlemen, Leopoldo.
Also part of our center table, a person who's been very, very important within the world of horse shows as an owner, a family member. She comes from a long-standing family from Ocala, Florida, with the Weber family. Her brother, of course, is a multiple champion in the sport of four-in-hand driving. She has been very intimately involved with the Washington International Horse Show, and of course, she is the mom of Chloe. I'd like to introduce Juliet Reed.
And last but not least, of course, in the very centre, the current world number 3, he's been world number 1 as well. And right the way through from double Olympic gold to world championship medals as well. He is really still very much one of the main stars of world show jumping in the very centre. Ladies and gentlemen, McLean Ward.
He's also a father of Lily, right? That's the most important. That's the most important thing. Well, we're going to start things off before we get into each one of the subjects. We mentioned, Caesar mentioned about 5-star, Nations Cup, officials, media. We have a lot of topics to cover here tonight. We're going to allow each one of our panelists to talk for a minute or so and get just an opening remark, basically on their opinions of where we are today. We're going to start off at the corner of the table, and we're going to work all the way down. Max Amaya.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for organizing this, Cesar. I think it's a great idea. I'm honored that you asked me to be part of this panel. The way I see the sport today, it has evolved very much in the last 20, 25 years, especially the last 10 years. It went from being a sport to be an industry. You know, there's a lot of shows. It requires a lot of horses. Some of these, you know, changes are being very difficult for us to digest or to get used to. But everything, I think, is trying for the best of the sport. Sometimes we agree with certain things, sometimes we disagree. And I think sitting here and trying to discuss all those things it's the beginning of, you know, the changes for the good. As far as international competition, as Peter mentioned, I come from Argentina, which is a country very south of the continent, and it's for us very difficult to get to the international scene. I have many friends that have come with me. We're privileged to be here. And for people that are still there, it's not as easy as for people that are here to get to the major championships or be on top of the world rankings. I like to say that, you know, all these new shows and this new format is helping us and, you know, some of the athletes from our countries to really get into the mix of things and get a possibility to be at the top of the sport.
Okay, thank you, Max. Well, we're going to move on to Leopoldo now for the second man behind. Of course, the Olympics and much more. Leopoldo.
For me, it's an honor to be sitting here with this very prestigious panel. Thank you, Cesar, to do this, and thank you for all of you to coming. Very important faces here of the sport, and it's very nice to be all together here. My concern for many years is in our sport, I see we don't have a principles and we don't have a foundations writing in anywhere. Even we don't have a definition of what is our sport. And when we don't have this, I think we need to discuss this and we need to find a way. And to do a little bit of history of the sport was created that take the horses jumping outside to the stadium, the name of stadium jumping. This is the reason of the sport. And this is a combination of the horse and rider, and they need to show the capacity to jumping, play pass hazards, and the most closest is possible to the nature. That was our root of the sport. But to do a definition, I think is important. I think the show jumping is a series of obstacles, a strategic place in a ring to demonstrate that the couple, horse and rider, is brave, very important, had the ability to jump different type of fences, not all the same, have a scope, have been careful, show that is fast, capacity of galloping in a good balance, and very well prepared in dressage, and in one environment very near to the nature. But this is our roots. And very important to have the aesthetic, and with aesthetic, you helping to the public, and we need to produce a competition to be, to the horse and rider demonstrate all of the main principles. And the competition need to be good sport, interesting, and exciting. I think this is my, how we're talking about foundations and principles of the sport.
Thank you very much, Leopoldo. And now we're going to move right down the table. The king, Mr. Morris, your opening remarks.
Well, I also am very honored in my antiquity to be included with this young group. This guy way over to my left, he's got slightly graying hair. In 1972, I thought him too old to take on and fix his leg. It was a few years ago. So he's done the sport a while. I know most of you. You know me, most of you. And as a person and as a horseman, I am a traditionalist. I am going to talk about an English guy. I don't know how many English people are, Colonel Mike Ansell. Look up his book. You can find it on the internet. It's about this big, and it tells you all about our sport. Christine knew Mike Ansell, I think. Yep. Mike Ansell preached, and it was the intention of the sport, as Leopoldo just said, the intention of the sport to bring the country to the arena. That is, people that rode across the country, fox hunted, etc., wanted competitions against their friends or enemies to see who had the best horse. Now, the intention, bring the country to the arena, that's gone. That's gone. That doesn't exist. I would say the closest is Calgary hangs on to that original intention. This is the principle of show jumping. The FEI, for years, the first page of their jumping book, at all costs, protect variety. That was from a mandate from the FEI. That is gone. Gone. It is called protectionism. I understand protectionism. I've been an amateur, I've been a professional, I've been a rider, I understand, I know about protectionism. It is also space and time. We don't have the time, we don't have the space that we used to have. It's expensive for show managers to protect variety. The professional hobby is very powerful. They have very, very precious, expensive horses. They don't want surprises. The best of the best of the best don't want surprises on the course. That is risky, surprises. We have an amateur lobby. They have no interest in bringing the country to the arena because that is very scary. That takes guts. They have to practice guts. Where's Lisa Delorier? Did we practice guts? Where's Christine also rode down there, and Chris Kepler, a bunch of you. We practice guts. That is gone. So you have the amateur lobby, you have the very, very expensive horses, and I listen, I understand it. I get it, I get it, I get it. It is an offshoot of our society worldwide, which is comfort-driven. It is comfort-driven, not discomfort-driven, like we were brought up, Christine, to suffer discomfort. That's gone. Also, and I appreciate this very much, we have animal welfare. I'm just throwing out the facts. I'm not making judgment on the facts. I'm just throwing out the facts. Now, that's my opening statement, and I'll probably have other things.
We hope so, George.
Absolutely.
What?
No, we hope so.
We'll be back to you, George. Thank you very much. So moving on to Lucy Davis.
Okay.
Follow that.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, guess I should first say thank you all for coming and listening, and thank you, Cesar, for including me on this panel.
On your side.
Okay. Well, I guess in the last 5 or so years that I've been trying to compete at the top sport, we've already seen so much growth in terms of amount of shows, prize money. It's really been exponential. So I, in general, think that's very exciting, and I'm sure that my fellow panelists can likely speak more to the details and the changes that have been made and need to be made to sustain and support that growth. But where I, as I guess the token millennial on the panel, see most potential is in how we represent our sport to the global community, how we promote it and better educate people about our athletes, our both horse and rider, our events, and really use social media and modern technology to get more people involved and keep younger people engaged over time. And I think that will really help our events and our riders continue to grow.
Thank you, Lucy.
Okay, we move on now, and we'll pass the microphone over to Mr. McLean Ward.
I'll keep my opening remarks brief, which is contrary to the norm. First, thank you, Cesar, for including us and putting this together. You had this idea a few weeks ago, and you know, we're all so busy here, and there's so many balls we need to juggle, and really you did a phenomenal job. When I walked in here today, I was very impressed by the amount of people here. This is week 12 of WEF. Most people are pretty exhausted, and for you all to make the effort to come here tonight shows what a keen interest you have in the development of our sport. And I'm interested to see how many online followers we have when this is all said and done, because I think that's a positive thing. When we look at all of these topics, and I can't wait till we get to them because I think they're all very interesting. You know, with any kind of growth, whether it be a business or a sport, family, you know, there's give and take, there's compromises, as George spoke of. With good comes problems. And to see, I find it positive, though those problems are there and need to be discussed and solved and solutions be found. For me, it's positive to see so many people wholeheartedly engaged in trying to find those solutions for the betterment of the horse's life, the betterment of the sport, and the lives that we so have chosen. So it's really exciting to see that.
Thank you, McLean. Now moving on to a lady with an all-round knowledge of the sport, Juliet Reed.
Hi. I see show jumping as having 4 cornerstones. You have the athlete, you have the organizers, you have the FEI, and you have the owners. And we need a direction and a business model that works. I think the growth has been so quick that the business models that have had to work are the athlete has to also be a horse dealer and a trainer. The FEI puts regulations. I think there has to be a way so that it's profitable and for people to survive in this sport by being an athlete.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Juliet.
Thank you, and Captain Canada, Mr. Ian Miller.
Thank you very much. And I also echo everybody else's thoughts of thanking Cesar for organizing this. And your interest, all of you being here tonight, speaks volumes. I think this type of format probably has global potential, because held worldwide, it might be quite remarkable what's going to come out of this. Every sport that goes anywhere has to be commercialized. It must be a business or it will not be successful. You think of the NFL, for example, the National Football League. They get more than $7 billion a year just in TV rights. So right there, they've solved a lot of problems. And I'm not convinced that our governing bodies, national and international, are quite as sharp as they need to be about the whole business aspect, because developing the business side of our sport, I believe that we have a top group of horse rider combinations, and we provide great sport. So it's a matter of taking that great sport that we provide and commercializing it, thereby reducing all the costs we all know about the costs. And I think we have an extremely saleable product. You go a long way to find someone who doesn't like a horse. And it's pretty interesting to everybody that it's a sport where men and women compete equally. And There's quite an age diversity in the sport with the athletes, as I can attest to. And I just think our sport has grown so much. With that, we have growing pains, but when I look at it, I would say the state of our sport is very strong and very healthy.
Good, thank you, Ian. Moving on to Guilherme Jorge.
Thank you, Cesar, for the invitation. It's, as everybody said, an honor to be here among this great group of people. And I echo a lot of what they say about the importance of the tradition of the sport. And I think what we're going to discuss here with this great audience is how to balance the welfare of the horse, how we can sell a product to the spectators, and do it in a modern way that we can also broaden the possibilities for the upcoming athletes.
Thank you very much, Key. And we're going to move right into our topics. I'd like to just mention to everybody that with the diversified group we have up here, we mentioned about, and when Cesar was trying to get this group together, we're talking about the young, and the word is spelled OLD, doesn't exist in this group. It is the experienced group, right?
Absolutely.
It's the young and the experienced. So that's our theme here today. But anyways, discussion worldwide and discussion within this panel. And I'm going to ask McLean to start things off here in just a moment about 5 stars. The increase throughout the year, not only in North America, but worldwide, and the numbers, the ranking points, how they're done, are all 5 stars equal? And the formula that exists today, is this positive, negative? Is this all a good thing for the sport? And again, we're talking about the top line of the sport. And McLean, we're going to let you just fire things up here.
Okay, thanks, Pete. I think the increase in the top-level FEI events throughout the world, not just in the mainstream show jumping regions, but also in the developing show jumping regions, is phenomenal. I think that shows growth in the sport, growth in different areas of interest, and you see all of these shows on any given weekend, 5, 6, 7, 3, 4, 5-star shows around the world, and all full, every single one. 3 tours in Spain full, 3 tours in Palm Beach or in Florida full, shows going on in Mexico, California, Asia. I don't know exactly South America, but I'm sure they have events going on this time of year as well. So I think this is phenomenal, the growth. But as we've talked in the past, with all growth, there's growing pains. As far as the ranking points for 5 stars, I think we've come to a point now where there has to be another category. I don't think that a 5-star every week is of the same level. And unfortunately, I'm going to call Leopoldo out on this. Leopoldo's put in a lovely factor at the Masters of a 1.70 m Grand Prix. And he builds at 1.70 m, some fences. And, that's obviously a far more difficult class than a 5-star in February in Ocala. Twice as difficult, to be honest. So I think that there almost could be a super league, or as you see in tennis and golf, the majors. And I think there's a place for that in our sport, whether you take 4 to 6 major events a year where you could target and pinpoint those events with a top horse and a top athlete, and maybe not have to do as many of the other events to be up in the ranking. If you can win those major events, it really would catapult you up the list and keep you at the top of the sport. As far as the development, I've always used this phrase about my career, the way I see things in the United States. I always say to Beezy, the best thing that happened was that I came along, and the best thing that's happened to me is that Kent came along, because it forced us to be better. And there's no better example of that than Ian Miller. Every new generation that's come along in his career, unfortunately there's been a few, has made him better, has made him be open-minded, find better horses. The horses you have to pick today are better than the horses you picked when you were doing this with my father. You've had to evolve. You've had to stay physically fit, if not fitter than you were as a young man. And that's remarkable. And I think that's a testament to the sport improving, the horses improving, the riders improving, the training improving. Of course, that comes we have so much more in the industry, so much more in the sport, there's a lot of average. There's a lot of average every day. We see it in the Grand Prix, we see it at the shows, but I think the best of the best are always getting better, and I think the people who are the best of the sport in 15 years will be kicking my butt. I believe when we talk about the team Nations Cup competition, for me, I see this being based around nationalistic teams. Countries, riders coming together as a team to represent their country. I'm not convinced on this concept of a corporate team. I don't think it's going to take off in our sport. That's my personal belief. If it does, I'll be the first one to be part of it and to sing its praises. But right now, I see that the development as a team sport is from a nationalistic point of view, rally the country. I see that direction as being a team sport. Otherwise, we're an individual sport, at least on the stage. We all have our teams behind the scenes, right? I'm the biggest promoter of my behind-the-scenes team. We have a small army. But we're an individual sport like golf and tennis. As far as the development of the CSIO 3 and 4-star competitions, I think it's an idea to be pursued. I think that you always have to find a balance between the top, highest level of the sport and giving younger generations, people coming up the ranks, horses and riders, the opportunity to get a taste of that while we can't have them all at that level all the time. There's only so much room. You see in an event like this week, a 5-star and a 2-star together, I think that works beautiful. I think you see great competition at both levels. People can choose their level a little bit depending on their personal ranking or where their horses are at, but yet they're part of the greater sport. They're enthusiastic about what they're doing and at the same time possibly aspiring to do more.
Okay, thank you. Should we come down to...
I'd say talk to Leopoldo. He was the one who brought up in that conversation with McLean.
I really agree with McLean. The sport need to have, like the other sports, this is already invented, a Grand Slam of shows. Some shows are the real shows. Even when you see the material, the rings, the variety of fences and everything you find is different shows. And these need to be, I don't know, 6-star, 7-star. I don't know the point, but I totally agree with McLean. And I was one of the first person to jump to jump 170. But that don't mean this make difference, and this make the real winner, and this make the goods come to the top. Is to when you're jumping in that level is totally different than McLean says, and I think is very important. I agree, this can't be every week, but we need to have some shows at that level. Need to be a control in these two, but if we start to do this thing every week, we will finish with the sport too. Need to be over a control to some shows can do, and I think this is important.
Thank you. Who would like, Guillermo George, to come to you?
So I agree with both Leopoldo and McLean on this. I think one thing that the FEI was trying to do, and I see that John Madden is here, the FEI was working on a qualification of the horse shows not based only on the prize money, but also on the quality of the riders, the quality of the facilities. I think that's very important also to broaden the possibilities of countries having a higher star qualification on their shows. Coming from Brazil and from seeing a lot of shows in Latin America, we saw very, very nice shows with great facilities, good level of competition, but unfortunately our economies don't allow us to have that prize money. So I think that idea that the qualification of the horse shows are not based only on the prize money, I think that is a very important thing and will help go towards what we think it's important to have the majors and the more important shows as well. I think back to the ranking points. I think I'm surprised to see how many events a rider can use to collect points to be on the rankings. It's more than 50 at the same time. I think that has a positive specs because it helps increase the industry, because that means that more horses are needed, more staff, everything. It's very powerful to increase the industry. On the other hand, it gives has sport goes a little bit to the side because there's not an equal opportunity for all the talent riders. So I think it's also an interesting point to be looked at.
Thank you, Guy. Well, I'm going to come across to Lucy Davis to talk about riders riding in 10, 15 years' time. You'll be a part of that. What are your thoughts and what we've heard already?
Sure. I definitely agree that I think there should be more criteria to a five-star show than just the amount of prize money that's offered, and also the way it's distributed across the classes. A lot of times you'll see just a really big Grand Prix. And I think also, trying to promote each event as an event that people want to come to engage with our sport is really important. So having facilities that encourage that, I think, is something that should be paid more attention to. I also agree with what McLean said about the team aspect being based on country. Having participated in different types of teams, I think that that is kind of the only way that we're going to maintain our identity in at championships and the Olympics and things like that. If we start to kind of mess with that model, I think it's really hard to follow for people who maybe happen upon the sport and want to keep engaged. The more that the more kind of random classes that are introduced to encourage engagement are I think more confusing than beneficial, and promoting the Grand Prix we have and the events and the Nations Cups with riders for their countries sends a very clear message, and that's kind of should be more the focus.
Thank you, Lucy. Ian, as a rider, any other thoughts on five stars? I'd like to go back a little bit also on Nations Cup, and I know Nations Cup is dear to George's heart with the development of all his great riders have been a part of his career, but back to the five-star maybe thoughts a little bit.
Yeah, I'm very much a Nations Cup rider. That's probably more interesting to me than the Grand Prix at that event. And when I think back over the years, I can pretty much tell you every rider I've ridden with on every Nations Cup team, win, lose, or draw, and I can tell you who the chef was. I really remember that, and just the camaraderie that comes from that. And when you ride with riders on a Nations Cup team, it's a very special bond forms. And that's why very good teams become great teams, because of that synergy, and it's so rewarding to be involved in that. So I am a huge believer in Nations Cups, and I think we need the lower level ones to develop these young riders, because how else are they going to learn how to ride in Nations Cup? You can take a very successful Grand Prix rider and put them on a Nations Cup team, and their ability to ride a horse will drop by about 25%. And that's because of the unique pressure of a Nations Cup. And then they learn how to do it. And then they're just as good in the Nations Cup as they are in anything else. As to the five stars, we wouldn't be having so many five stars and so much demand for five stars if we didn't have the horse rider combinations. So we have the athletes again. And when I think about, I don't watch so many other sports, but I was thinking about this today. When I see Tom Brady and the Patriots take the field, and I know they're going to move that ball down the field with surgical precision and military discipline, I find that very interesting to watch, even though I'm not a great football watcher. So where I'm going with this is if we want to encourage people to watch our sport, we got to show them the best. And we don't need to do it every week, but we're so lucky to have Spruce Meadows up there in Canada, supported by such great sponsors and, of course, our Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And that television goes out live or tape delayed. And the number of people that learn about our sport and follow it because of that. And what drives a sponsor, of course, is the eyeballs that are watching it. That's television. And again, I go back to my idea. I believe we have a wonderful product. It's a matter of commercializing it properly.
So should we come across to, let's get George Morris's view. Here we come, George. Variety was discussion. Where are we up to?
Well, it's not my expertise. I certainly like listening to what McLean said, and which I often did as chef to keep follow his advice. I also liked what Leopoldo said about a bigger than 5-star show, which a few shows could be, but it's not really my expertise. That's not really at my stage of life, my big interest. I was never in school a team. I never liked team sports. However, as a rider, I was brought up by Bill Steinkraus and Bert Denemeth to love the Nations Cup. That was always the centerpiece of a show. And as chef to keep, I love the Nations Cup. The Grand Prix was the icing on the cake after the Nations Cup. So I'm a Nations Cup person. I'm again, to be perfectly honest, I'm not so keen on all these other team events. But I do love the Nations Cup. I think there should be different levels so people get experience in the Nations Cups. They should be protected. I think the sport is going forward as an individual sport with Nations Cups. Not as it used to be in my day, teams from all over the world, Army teams often. They were Nations Cup teams that at the end of the show did the Grand Prix. I think it's flopped, which I think is okay. I think it's okay. But I very much do believe in protecting, enhancing, doing whatever we can to preserve the Nations Cup.
Thank you, George. And Max, a little reflection on South America, and also like to get Juliet in on this, and then we'll move on to our next topic. So,
well, as far as South America, I haven't been there in 24 years, so it's a little difficult for me to identify with that. But the reality is that, like Guillermo said, it's a little bit more difficult for horse and rider combinations from there to really match to the top level of the sport. Number one, financial reasons. Number two, more often than not, you find that the level cannot be matched to Saturday night, in Palm Beach or Calgary or even in Europe. I do agree that the more number of 5 stars is a good thing. I also think that when you award a show a 5-star, it has to meet the criteria of a 5-star by the money, by the facility, by what they have to offer. And I do believe very strongly that we have an individual sport. When you see tennis, golf, you don't see teams. Showing in Nations Cup, you're representing your country, is something that you do in the Olympics, and you do in special events. I also agree very much with McLean about having maybe a Super League or a Grand Slam of events, which they have been historically the best events, the Masters, Aachen, Dublin, Hickstead, you can name probably 8 shows around the calendar that are special. But I don't see these, corporate teams or, transforming this individual sport, which is a horse and a rider, into a different team that is not your country.
And Julia, just one more thought on this subject, and we're going to like to move on to a favorite subject of all of ours, and to the officials. So stand by, Stephen.
Just from the organizer's point of view, I would like to say that everyone wants more 5 stars, everybody wants more Nations Cups, but the someone has to pay for it. And what pays for horse shows is multiple weeks, multiple rings, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And that's what we've created. If we want to have special events, then we need to not have the FEI holding our arms with regulations that they've created to apply to a 12-week series. There just has to be, an economic reason for doing it, because no one wants to fork that bill. And the production is just not good enough. We hosted Live Oak last week. NBC Sports televised it. It was shown Monday morning at 7 a.m. on the Olympic Channel. Okay, great. It doesn't help our sport.
Okay. McLean, I know, has got a little somebody wants to add on.
Juliet, we agree. We always are going to have to find that balance between what's funding the bigger sport. And the American model, so to speak, or the North American model has always been the back rings fund the main ring, right? We know that. And there's been great efforts made by some events in our country, Peter, the head of several of them, Devon, and places like this that have really tried to put the sport at the forefront and found that balance, but you have a community behind it because it's been promoted well, it's been sold well. Two things I just wanted to go back on from this topic, just to touch base on the team competition one more time. You see these individual sports, as everybody on this panel has said. You see golfers come together for the Olympic Games or the Davis Cup in tennis, and that they can not only rally behind that national type competition, but also the fans can associate with it. And when that's corporate, I don't personally see the association. And the last thing that we didn't really touch on about that was in this forum topic is the ranking formula and the best formula. And that's always a system that's going to need to be tweaked. And I would love to see this type of super league, so to speak, or majors where you could really pinpoint those events. And it was an idea I first heard from John, actually. So John, I always thought it was a brilliant idea always. You kept bringing that up over the last few years, John Madden. Where you pinpoint those events, like we said, and those ranking points are so strong that it will carry you throughout the rest of the season. One thing that we have to be a little bit careful of is the computer ranking system is heavily influenced by different groups and different segments of the athletes. And no different, and we have two course designers up here, no different than these two gentlemen know that I'm going to work them depending on what horse I'm riding, if I'm honest. We're going to see this in the ranking list. Different regions of the world, if they have too much control over the ranking formula, are going to, without even realizing it, work those rules that it favors their setup, their style of jumping, their style of horse shows, their particular situations. And I think that's something we have to be very careful of in our sport and make sure that a more neutral governing body certainly controls that's for the interest of the entire world, not just a particular region.
Thank you, Vic. Ian.
One point that we didn't mention about Nations Cups, too, is the unique connection between our Nations Cup and show jumping being an Olympic sport. And if our sport ever got compromised on our Olympic abilities or status as an Olympic sport, I think that'd be a very serious negative. And the Olympics wants the Nations Cup, and that would be a very strong reason for defending it.
Okay. So move on to the next of our topics, which is officials and rules. And just throwing out we've got a few topics to cover here. Everything from the officials in the sport currently, how they're currently compensated, how we train them, and is considered a good official the one that knows the rules, or should there be more factors to it to be involved in that? And are the standards, rules in place to be enforced enough currently to protect the welfare of the horse, which is always at the very heart of all of this? So bringing us on to rules and officials, why don't we start with one of our officials in one of the different capacities. Guilherme Jorge, let's start with you.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I think the questions here are if we have a good enough team of officials. I have to say we have the best that are available at the moment. Can it be improved? Of course it can, like everything in our sport. I think one of the most important things on an official's career is his background. I think sometimes we lack a little bit of horsemanship, but most of the times everybody, all my colleagues that come to work at a horse show, they started as a rider or involved in some way with the horses, and they are brought in by the passion to the horse. I think that only knowing the rules is not enough. I think it's very important that you have experience and that you know what goes on with the athlete, with the horses, with all the team that is behind the horses and riders. And I can say for most of my colleagues, everybody is trying to improve and trying to stay current on that, right? I think the question that mentioned that if the officials should be compensated, I think that the answer is quite obviously yes, because as one of the things that we mentioned here is that the value of the horses and the prize money, they were exponentially, they rised in the recent past. And of course, to be people dedicated long enough to prepare and to be able to work on those events that deal with those horses, they need to be compensated, because it is for a lot of, especially in North America, more than in Europe, but it needs to be a full profession, right? You need to dedicate your life to improving, to learning, and to practicing to become a top official and deal and offer to the athletes what they need in the top events. So I think that is a very important subject as well.
Thank you. Lucy, I'm going to ask you a question, not a question, just pose a thought. As a very young top rider, do you feel comfortable, or would you feel comfortable in posing a question, something you don't see correct out on the, let's say, enforcing rules at a show and a Grand Prix, in approaching an official? I mean, do you feel that that you have a say in something that you don't like out there?
You mean, are officials approachable?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
basically that's the question.
I haven't had too many occasions where I've had to do that, but on the rare occasion that I have, it was well received. I usually consult with other riders beforehand, though, to have the support. But, I mean, I think that in general, I wouldn't feel like I needed to I wouldn't feel that I couldn't say something.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. I think also part of this with the officials and rules are course designing, and I know Guy talked a little bit about it. I think we are armed with the greatest horses and riders in our sport. We have the best course designers that we can ever imagine in this world. The jump equipment is incredible everywhere we go. And then you look at maybe the time allowed sometimes. Is that a factor? Does that need to be a factor? So again, this is just part of the thought. And are we heading in to test somebody? Are we the thought process and going in that direction? And just some thoughts. Leopoldo, why don't you just start off on that with the basically your strategy and course designing and what you feel and where we are with the sport so far, as in your role.
I think in my role of course designer, the sport today go to very, very light fences, and too fast, in my opinion. Everybody say I use the time allowed. I know everybody will laugh. But now, yeah, I am famous for short time allowed, but I see my colleagues and I will the courses with them, and they are shorter than me today.
True.
I think, and I think we need to be more careful. Even I have discussions with John Madden when he was in the FBI, and I think he have reason that Changing the time come very often, and this coming from wheeling the courses too tight, and after it's easy to going up. It's more difficult to going down. But I think the rule need to continue, but don't use it all time. I think I see too many times doing when you're talking about time allowed, and I thinking we need to change a little bit the mentality of building to put another questions, not only light poles on the top of the air and go fast. And long distance and fast and fast and fast, but I think this don't improve for the crowd the interest on the classes. If we see today the results, I have a statistic of many classes, and the number of clean rounds and the number of full farters are huge. That means a small mistake, a small mistake, a small mistake is not rideability, is not, and put out many times the good of the sport, in my opinion.
Why don't you chime in just a little bit on your forte, basically?
Well, I think it's difficult to generalize and say, okay, we have one formula for one competition and that's going to work for all of them, right? We are here on our 12th week of the highest level of competition that you're probably going to see in the world. And you have competitions at 1.45 meters with 90 horses that 40 are going to qualify for the Grand Prix on the weekend. So I agree that the time allowed is one of our tools, is one of the tests that we're gonna ask from the riders. But I agree with Leopoldo as well. Carefulness is not the only question. So we need, of course, to enforce what George said about the variety of the jumps, about the difference of the tests that we're gonna propose on a course. When we design a course, we want the best horse-rider combination to win, the one that is fast, careful, scopy, and brave. So it is really a question of balance on all these questions. I agree with Leopoldo in the fact that the variety of the fences and the tests are different, are very important, and that's what's going to make a difference on getting the best horse-rider combination.
Okay. Can I just throw it quickly to Guy? We already talked about going up to 1.70 meters last year with a class. Where do we go in the future with course designing? Because we're going up and up and up.
Oh, I think the 1.70 meters, it's a very specific situation from you can use that on a not more than a handful of shows, and it's the maximum height. No, of course nowadays 1.60 meters is a maximum height. If you put a vertical of 1.60 meters in the middle of the course, you have to put a shark in the other side to get a rail. So it's a one specific situation, the 1.70 meters, and it's used on one obstacle. So it's not. I don't think that's going to be the trend of the shows. But for us, course designers, it gives us an option to go over the 1.60 meters on certain elements. Again, you have to be very careful on when and where you're going to place that question.
And Leopoldo wants to jump in on this, obviously.
I think the 170 depends a lot on the material. The material that I use in Calgary is a heavy material, the horses respect more. You can jump in 170 more easy than jumping, and I never will put one skinny jumping 170, but the long pole and is different. Depends a lot of the material. The height don't say everything in the sport.
Any other discussion? McLean course design?
Yeah. I have a couple of questions. Use the bike at 170. What? Use the bicycle at 170 last year. 168, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. My apologies.
The bicycle is not one skinny like the others.
and we all have one now. I have a couple of comments on the course design, because I'm going to defend my generation of riders. And though I wasn't competing a while back, Ian will probably get upset with me, Leopoldo, George, but I am a student of the sport, and obviously through my parents, and watched a million videos. Actually today was showing Samuel Perot a video of the Invitational from 1983. The triple combination was open face Liverpool, triple bar Oxer, and it was a video of my father, and he hit all 5 of the 6 poles as hard as you could imagine. The standards shook and they stayed up. For sure, the fences had trees in them, and they were boulder, and the 16-foot rails. But what also has changed is you could attack those fences. You could ride a greener horse at the jump. The fence held off. It wasn't a rub class. So yes, it's gotten more delicate, and we see extremes in Europe in particular, particularly in Holland, Germany, Belgium, that circle where you see a lot of 3-meter poles. But you talk about Calgary or Aachen or Hickstead, I have to say that I think it shows a progression that the sport has gotten better and it's gotten more difficult, because the jumps are big and wide, but now you can't ride at them at all. They're rub fences. So if they have any spook factor, you're sitting there, barely putting pressure, compared to, you had a skinny, John and I watched a video of the Aachen World Championships. The careful jump on the course, John told me, and I've seen the video, was the skinny with a 3-foot wall, 2 planks, and about 4 more white poles. That was the skinny fence, or that was the careful fence. So while the material has gotten lighter and a little bit less natural, you take a venue like Calgary or Aachen, it's as natural as ever, and we can't ride at the jumps. So I actually think that shows an evolvement in the quality of the riding and the horses and the training, myself. On the discussion about officials and course designers for that matter, and I know this has been brought up before, this is not a new idea, but I do believe long-term our sport has to go in the direction of having the events pay a fee to the federation, and the federation hire the officials and maybe even the course designers. I think that too many organizers are going to try to influence or pick favorites, whether it be officials or course designers, because they control their livelihood. I think this is not an easy road, but there has to be a way that the federation is putting in the course designer or putting in the official, and there needs to be a ranking system for the officials where their compensation is according to their ranking, and throughout the year by a multitude of different factors, the course designers and the officials get ranked on their knowledge, their quality of their work, their consistency, all of the same factors that we as athletes are going to be ranked on. If I don't jump clean rounds, I'm not going to make a lot of money. I'm not going to get future owners. I'm not going to get good horses to ride. The system has to be in place also for our officials and our course designers. And it has to be a system that the kinks need to be worked out in, that it's fair and there's opportunity. But I do see that as the way forward. The last thing I want to touch on about both course designers and officials is, for me, the best officials, the best course designers are the ones who obviously have a great deal of knowledge, but that stay open-minded, are horse people in their heart, whether their background is 100% horse-related or not, and you have the ability to have logical conversations with. I've had a situation over the last few years, it actually started in Spruce Meadows a few years ago, about schooling a Liverpool in the schooling area. And there was a rule in place where you had the Liverpool under an oxer, and you weren't allowed to roll the ground line out. Now, any horseman knows that if you have a Liverpool under the fence and you give the horse more ground line, you're making it easier for the horse. You're building confidence. But there was a rule in place that said you couldn't have a gap between the ground line and the Liverpool. And I got in some battles with stewards about this in Calgary, and it happened again here in Palm Beach. And I went to a higher level, and the problem was sorted, and we had a very nice conversation about it, and it was done in a very professional way. But there was no logic used in this situation. And I find that disappointing. And I find that that's an example of the direction where we need to go, whether it be our conversations with course designers. How many great conversations have we had? And we've had moments that aren't as great as well, but for the majority, great moments, where we all have a common interest. The same with the stewards. Listen, we want to promote our sport to the public, to the world, the best that it can be done. We want to do our sport well. We want to be able to warm up, to be able to perform our best. But we want to put our horses first. We want to put their interest, our owners' interest, ahead of our results. And the only way for our sport to go forward is for the horses' interest to be first. And there has to be logic and conversations involved, not just because, well, it says black and white. It says this way. As to your point, Guy, about the height is not the only factor. If you get a piece of paper and says the course is supposed to be 160, you don't build every fence 160. And it goes to both of those situations.
Max, did you have something?
Yeah, to touch a little bit on the course designing. I don't know, I think everybody's aware that in a couple of years we're not going to be allowed to use hind boots anymore. So that being said, as the sport evolved, the materials got lighter, the course designing got a lot more careful. We as riders, we start developing different methods to get our horses to jump a little more careful and a little higher and a little better. So when that gets changed, course designing is going to have to change as well, because I can guarantee you 80% of the horses that go today in a very careful Grand Prix with the help of hind boots will not be able to compete in the same class without.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know whether it's good or bad, as long as the course designing match, what you're being asked for the rider and the horse.
Leopoldo.
I think I've been in this for many years, and in my experience, the course designer of today, we have enough experience to see if when this happens, we need to build different. Is that simple. If I go to the first thing I do, even in Calgary, when we have the best, I need to see who are there, who will jump, how are the horses, and how strong I can go. This is simple. If don't using the back boot, we need to building a little bit more solid, a little bit more maybe deep cups or more heavy poles to have the correct number of pins. It's simple. I think the core designers don't have anything to do with this. We do what we do, depends on the horses we have.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I agree. I think we're going to be able to adjust to the new reality, like with no problem.
Just came back to the first part of the comments, and there's come to Juliette as an organizer, talking about compensation of officials and how it all works. And obviously there are different systems in Europe, different systems in other parts of the world. What your thoughts are as an organizer and working with the systems we've talked about here?
Well, I've worked with most of the people here. And I don't know, I think the most important thing probably is to have a very strong ground jury that's stand up and have the conversation with the course designer, and yeah, so there are checks and balances.
Okay. So 2 more topics on the agenda here tonight, commercial and media. Just a few thoughts, I just want to see if anybody is interested in discussing about is our sport, again, not asking a question, but a comment. George, do you want to talk about the...
Not if we're running late. We're pressed for time.
How long
Yes,
are you going to be?
yes and no.
Luckily, I've been intimately connected with high-level sport, Olympic Games, since 1956. So I've seen all decades of the sport. We have to never forget Bert Denemeth, who revolutionized the sport in 1984 in Los Angeles. A 180-degree turn from the major blood and guts, unjumpable courses, and he was your mentor, and you're our mentor. There are 3 ways to judge jumpers: carefulness, speed, high and wide. We have all 3 today. I'm not saying today is not very difficult. I'm a leg rider. I would be a disaster today. It'd be very difficult for me. I'm not saying today is very hard. However, it is one-dimensional. It is, you can't have speed without careful. You can't go fast with a horse that's not careful. It's impossible. So you are directing the whole sport, educating young people, and it's good because jumpers have always been supposed to be careful, and they always have been careful. I grew up in the rub era, where touches to count. But what bothers me, it is so, as a teacher, it is so one-dimensional because I'm still training horses today. It is so one-dimensional, and that is the whole emphasis, which is one of the carefulness, speed, or high and wide. You can't teach bold. We used to call it bold. You can also call it courage. You can call it guts. You can't really teach that today to people. You know, to be perfectly honest, you're apprehensive training horses to go to Old Salem, Southampton, Calgary. You're a little apprehensive because you take the carefulness out of them for the other horse shows. And it's like a fish out of water. Watching this weekend on that beautiful, beautiful polo field that we used to, Peter and I used to jump on that field. Peter, remember your finest hour? It is a pity, or Hicksted, or Aachen, to see all the fly fences next to the beautiful natural old fences of old. Not that they have to all be quite as daunting as they used to be, but it's sad to see that. It's sad to see it's all one-dimensional. There's no bold. It is numbers, 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 verticals, oxers, airy rails. That's the sport today, is striding. I like striding, you like striding. Bert Denemeth taught us about striding. That is what it's about. Every show, whether you go to Beijing, Thermal, Paris, Moscow, Wellington, they're all the same fences, they're all the same courses. That's sad. That's very sad, in my opinion. The great Pierre Doriot, the great Frenchman, the only man that ever won the gold medal twice, went to The Hague in 94, the WEG in Holland in 94. He went for 2 days. He said all the jumps are the same, all the courses are the same. There are no spectators because it is boring. And as exciting it is for me to still see some great classes, to look at the rings, it is boring. I have to be honest, it's boring. I have to say, the Olympic Games, you two guys have built the Olympic Games recently, have variety. That is very, very strange. It is very, very strange that the Olympic Games presents more. I'm on a variety kick. John knows that. I've always been on a variety kick because I think it makes better horses and makes better riders. And I'm interested in teaching riders. That is very strange that you will go to the Olympic Games and there's more variety than you see the rest of the year. That's not normal. It shouldn't be like that. Why is water such a problem today? It didn't used to be a problem. It didn't used to be a problem because it's rails, 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 rubber Liverpool, maybe a wall, water. The water is like a fish out of water. Rails, 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 water. Water used to be part of the course. Walls, dry ditches, hedges, etc. You can still have the carefulness with all of that. That's why if there's a reason to take the water out and just have rails, which is what lots of you want, then take the water out because it's a fish out of water actually today. I love the water, but it doesn't relate to a lot of other different jumps that should be there. This is not an advantage for the future riders of the world. There's a lack of variety. I, as a teacher, and I still teach a great deal, know that, because I am not given permission to teach people to solve different problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Let's move on to the last two topics. And commercially, just to mention about this is sport, relying heavily on commercial aspect of the sport and forgetting about the actual sport itself. Is the sport sustainable? The diversification of sponsorships that are involved, where does that come from? And just maybe there are no thoughts, but I know Juliet probably from again your involvement with Washington and as an owner and as an organizer, that this is probably near and dear to you as well in some thoughts.
Well, sponsors come from eyeballs. And to get the eyeballs, it has to be interesting. And it speaks a little to what George said about being more interesting. The technology exists to make it, more fun to watch. You watch baseball, they have the little yellow green line. You watch golf. I think we need to advance. And that's where the sponsors are going to come from.
Are there sponsors out there? I mean, are we still tapping into this, or are we still having trouble, or the diversification of how we present our sport? Is that, I know most of the sponsors basically come from within the sport.
From an organizer's perspective, it's very difficult to get sponsors.
And will always continue to be, probably, unless we
Well, our
ways a little
athletes
bit.
need, sorry.
Any other thoughts on
Wear too many
the
hats.
subject, Lucy?
Yeah, I mean, like I touched upon a little bit in my opening statement, I think that this is where there's so much untapped potential in our sport, or for our sport. I mean, if you look at other sports, and Ian's brought up football, we are so lagging in our the promotion of our athletes, the horses. If I've learned anything in my short career, it's that everybody comes from a different place. Everybody has a different story. Teams of people that have gotten them there, and we don't tap into any of that in the broadcasting, at least for the mainstream media, like Juliet was saying. It's nice that we have some sources that, us as sport enthusiasts plug into and watch, but if you're trying to communicate to a broader audience and get sponsors that aren't involved already, there has to be better education about what our sport is and the people that do it. And this extends beyond just kind of backstory and personal details about the horse rider relations, and also to statistics about riders and performance. And if my dad can watch golf for 12 hours on a Sunday, there's no way that people can't plug into show jumping for an hour.
Right, and that's a nice segue into our final topic, but Ian, I know that the handling of sponsors and so forth, I mean, there's no one better. And just some thoughts about basically where our sport is and where it might be going.
Well, just to the comment about eyeballs, I had, some years ago, I had a talk with, he was Canadian president of a large soft drink company, and we discussed sponsorship. And he said, let me explain this to you, how it goes. He says, we have an advertising and promotion budget, and here is the percentage of that would be directed towards sponsoring an athlete. And how we figure out how much money we might give that athlete is how many cans and bottles of soft drink his association with us is going to sell. And he said that number can just get crunched right down. So if riders want sponsorship, then they must be able to sell product for us. And it's as simple as that. Occasionally you will get a CEO or somebody of great influence in a corporation who just says, I just want to do this. and everybody lets that person go along with it for a while. But to have sustainability, you better be selling product for them, or you won't have it. And that goes to making our sport more popular.
And can I just say one thing? We've moved so far into being a luxury sport. What everybody wants is the luxury product. Sorry, I'm not speaking tonight. Bleh.
Leopoldo, you want to say something?
I have experience for many years. I building Spruce Meadows for 25 years. And in every class I build, I go to the sponsors. And I talk to them normally during the jump off and in the Grand Prix. There is no jump off, I go at the end of the class. And what they like, my feeling is they like big crowd, a lot of TV, and excitement. And the problem of the sport is in many shows, we don't have crowd, we don't have the excitement. Sometimes we have TV and with not excitement, the TV is not good for the sport too. If we see the same all time, the people don't like it this. Our sport is not like a tennis or another sport to have one field is the same. Today we have many rings, square, rectangular things, and we need to have different things. And the different levels on the ring and things like this, the people like to see. And this is what the sponsor like. It's simple.
Just a personal opinion on this subject. Having been a part of the Las Vegas World Cup Finals, I have yet to be a part of a lot of great events, but they entertained the people that sat in the stands and sold the sport to a lot of people who weren't even interested or didn't even know what was going on in a city that has everything else going on. And to me, that was so impressive to be a part of that, to be entertained, to be solidly engaged in our sport for 3 hours, from everything, from what Lucy was saying, riders, getting the crowd involved. And it's like that at all the other major sporting events. I don't see why we can't continue to try to apply that.
Absolutely. Should we come to McLean in the middle? McLean, following on from that, the commercial aspects of your thoughts, I mean, and a little what Lucy was saying, she talked about the different things that need to be applied, but it would seem to organisers, various things are being applied, but in individual organisations. What are your thoughts on an overall strategy, how that develops? Who is responsible for developing the commercial side of the sport?
Well, one thing that I thought Lucy touched on a bit is how there's just a lack of connection and development of the story of the athletes and their stories. And I think even going back to our discussion about team competitions being nationalistic, to grow fans, there needs to be associations. I love to watch sports, but I particularly love the human interest side of it. You know, what was the person's struggles? What did they have to overcome? When I look at my own career, I'm more proud of some of those accomplishments than I am of victories in the ring necessarily. And I think that our production of our sport from a media point of view is bland. And, you know, starting with my generation and then older, you know, having to get more involved in social media, this is the way forward. This is how you know, expose yourself to the world. I'm a little slow, but I'm not closed-minded. But I think we definitely have to develop personalities in the sport. I remember Peter always would talk about Harry Dallaire. You know, that was a personality of the sport. Or Harvey Smith, you know, Rodney. You know, this is lacking. You know, we're bland, and I'm guilty of that as well. I'm a bit bland in my expression, right? So, you know, that's something that needs to be developed, and so that people can associate with individual athletes. One other thing that I think needs to be touched on is we, on one hand, in recent years have benefited immensely from the watch wars, so to speak. We have two major sponsors in our sport, Rolex and Longines, who are, you know, having somewhat of this internal battle with each other. And we have benefited financially from it a great deal. But I remember years ago, a rider who had a very successful horse said to me, and then the horse had gotten sick and gone out of the sport, and they had a lull. And the rider said to me, the mistake I made is when I had that great horse, I got lazy about finding the next one. And then one day I didn't have that horse, and I didn't have the next one either. And to me, that's a little bit of a factor right now when I look at this situation with Rolex and Longines. We are so very lucky in our sport to have them, both of them. We are so lucky that they are competing against each other to have the prime spot in our sport. But we're resting too much on it, in my opinion. And I don't know the solution to that. I'm not a marketing expert in any way. But I could see us waking up one day and not having the next horse.
Ian, let's come to you. Do you want to jump in? No. Ian, let's come across to you just to go back to a point. We're talking about connecting with the fan base there. You've been through a long career of how that's worked. What are your thoughts on it? We talked about variety. We've got so many different variety of shows now, of how we connect all of that together from the Hicksteads to, we know there's the show in New York, in Rolex, the Central Park, we're on Miami next week, and all that showed around the world. The fan base has got to be great, but how do we get all that together and how do we tell your story?
So are you addressing the concept of leagues?
Well, no, I'm not. I'm addressing as the sport as a whole. We've got variety there. How as a sport as a whole do we promote that and we capitalize on it?
Well, it goes to Peter's comment about Las Vegas. And I remember years ago, a couple of friends of mine came to the show, and they were boyfriend and girlfriend, and the girl was horse crazy, and the guy couldn't have cared less. But what ended up happening is there was a bar. That was good. And then the washrooms were nice and clean, and there was lots of them. And there was halftime entertainment. And his car didn't get stuck in the mud. And so he actually had a wonderful time. But he couldn't have cared less about the horses. So what percentage of the people that come to the show are the companion of the person that wanted to come? And so if they're going to come another time, we better entertain them. And going to your point, and what Wellington does, what this organization does every Saturday night, that's good entertainment. And if this is true, I don't know, but the idea of putting the Grand Prix on Saturday night was to avoid locking horns with polo on Sunday. And look at the unintended benefit that came from it. It's a spectacular event. And the stands are full every Saturday night. I also remember we were out in Calgary, and I was at the grocery store. I must still have my riding clothes on or something. And the lady, the cashier said, "Oh, you Spruce Meadows?" Yeah. And she said, "You know what I like about Spruce Meadows?" And I said, "Well, the jumping." And she said, "No, the parades. I go for the parades." So why do people go to these things? That has to be analyzed too. And every other sporting event does tremendous research on the fan base, and they find out what will drive them and how to bring them back again and again and again. And that is about enhancing the business side of our sport.
I think the personalities, the connections, the statistics, anything we can do to continue in that direction. Many years ago, we tried to develop nicknames for all the riders. This is probably 20, 25 years back. It did stick for a little while, but then it just disappeared. So anyways, and you know, McLean said he's going to work a little bit on his victory celebration and be connected to the audience a little bit more. But that's all a part of it. That's all they want. Is when somebody comes and watches a show jumping event, they want to know a little bit more about Lucy Davis and Ian Miller, McLean Ward. That's very important to them. And they also want to go home with saying that I learned something that night. Everybody likes to be an expert on rules or so forth. If they went home with a little explanation of what happened in a certain situation, like you can go home and brag with your buddy at your local pub and say, well, they did this at this horse show. So that's just all a part of the sporting scene and trying to connect with the audience, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Do we want Max? Anyone else want to jump in on this subject?
Otherwise, we'd like to just do a quick Q&A.
George, no?
George,
we're going to have this one out.
We are going to have George. We are going to have closing comments. But anyways, if there's any questions in the audience, we have someone, and we're going to get a microphone around to over in the corner there.
Okay.
And just kind of briefly, and then we're going to have a closing comment from all of our panelists.
Start with Daniel Blumen over there.
Good night, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. You know, it was very cool to listen from all of you guys, very important people. So I have a question here for all of you. Are there realistic chances or opportunities for a middle-class 12-year-old to pursue show jumping? Or is the sport in North America a high-class only sport because of the lack of opportunities for the kids that aren't really wealthy? And do you think that this is affecting the fan base our sport has in North America, and as such, as the captain says, we aren't a product for corporate sponsors to advertise because we don't have a fan base?
Okay, let's vote. McLean's going to go first.
I wouldn't want to be quoted as saying all 25, but I would say almost all of the top 25 in the world right now come from a middle class or lower background. Do they have opportunities? Absolutely. But all of them come from that background. Now, I don't think that determines. I've gone to bat for young riders who come from affluent backgrounds last year publicly. That doesn't determine their ability level, their potential. But at the same time, if you look down that world ranking list, all come from middle class or less than middle class backgrounds.
Dave, go ahead, Dave.
My question isn't current. No, it's how do you see it coming to the future? I'm not saying that there is a. I'm not from the philosophy of money has anything to do with being better or being worse. I think money shouldn't play that big of a factor. That's what I'm trying to say. That's why my question was clear. A 12-year-old middle class that lives in the United States of America, do they stand nowadays, looking into the future, a realistic chance? I know how it's been in the last 20 years. I know the top 50 in the world rankings in America. My question is for the future,
But
the ones
I
that are
think-
nowadays riding.
I think the same conversation took place 15 years ago. Maybe it's more extreme now because the price of the horses have gotten more extreme and the sport certainly has grown in expense. But the same could be said for a person who aspired to be a Formula One driver. How is he going to get himself noticed by Ferrari? How is he going to get to that level? He has to obviously market himself, be noticed. You know, without a good car, which costs more than a horse possibly, he's not going to be a great Formula One driver, right? So yeah, I absolutely think there is an opportunity. Is it easy? No, no chance. But nothing worth it is.
Can we, before we go to Luciano wants to jump on this one.
Yeah, just to follow up, one thing that has changed in the last 15 years is social media and the opportunity to broadcast our sport and our athletes and educate. And I think accessibility comes with education. And the more we educate about our sport, the more people and corporate sponsors we get involved in competitions that disrupt this cycle of athletes having to pay to play. And when athletes can be compensated as athletes, that will allow for I think, more middle class young riders to be able to move through the system. And the more we give back to educate those lower levels, both, or younger levels, both directly and indirectly through exposure to the sport, I think that's how it's going to move forward. I don't think perpetuating this cycle and this kind of image of it as a lifestyle sport is doing us any favors in the long term, because that, you know, as McLean touched on, how long is this, you know, watch war going to go, and what happens when they realize that, you know, other sports can get them more eyeballs? We need to promote the sport and educate so that we get more involvement from other industries and make it more accessible. And if you know, Coca-Cola instead of Rolex is sponsoring our riders, that's inherently more approachable and more relatable. And until we, as riders in our sport, become more relatable, it's hard for those pony kids that love ponies and love horses and grow up one day to realize they can't pursue it because of the expense. They become disengaged.
Thank you, Lucy. David Ballard can't wait to ask a question.
Well, excuse me. I think I know everyone at the table except for the two young ladies there. My question is about, or my comment and question is about the Nations Cup. The rules are changing or have been changed for the World Championships and the Olympic Games, and we are heading into WEG in August. And I wonder, basically from the riders, from the course designers' point of view, how do you think these new rules will affect the sport? Because it's gone the complete circle, and we are now going back to 3 riders, no drop score. Ian, we can remember when we won the gold medal in '68. We won the team competition with over 100 faults. Yep. And we changed the rules, I think, in 1972 to the 4 riders and a drop score. But with these new rules, do you think spectators, riders, trainers, everyone in the sport, how do you think that the new rules are going to affect it?
Should we come to Ian first on that, as he's been quoted on the question to start with?
Well, John Madden, who's been quoted here tonight, quoted a few times, but I believe the FEI has run the models going back over many past Nations Cups to see exactly how it would have changed things, how it would have played out. I do find it, I find it intriguing because some years ago, we tested a system where 4 riders and a drop score in the first round, and then the second round was just 3 riders, no drop score. And it sure made that second round pretty dramatic because things could go upside down just immediately, or a team could be eliminated, in fact. So with 3 riders and no drop score, it's a different sport. I would have left it alone personally, but I understand the pressure was from the IOC. They wanted more flags, more countries participating, and if you dial it down to 3, you increase the number of countries, if that is the reason. So we need our sport in the Olympics. We got to work with the IOC. We see what happens. One thing about horse people is we seem to be very resilient, and I'm sure we'll find our way.
Question to the back of the room then.
Hello. My brother is in a sport also that's not very popular, kite surfing, but he has a very, very big following. The reason is he uses social media. He's approachable. People can literally come to him for questions. He does a lot of sessions where he says, hey, I'm on this place. If you want to meet me, if you want some one-on-one questions, some training, he's opening his arms to the others, and there's people from all over the world that will say, wait, Dimitri's there? We're going to go there. So I think in this sport, the problem with our sport is that it's not relatable for a lot of people. They think that all of us that are in the top of our games are not able to be approached, that we keep them afar. So I think there should be a committee that the riders are on it, that they're talking about themselves, that they promote people coming closer, that they invite people from their town, you know, the best rider who gets the best point comes to the show and participates with one of the big riders. Some things that I've seen in England, in Hicks, where they were bringing small pony riders in the ring, and was making all the riders, the little ones, want to participate, to come into the sport. The mom of a 12-year-old that doesn't have so much money but is riding and leasing a horse is going to have that same chance to ride with any of you if they try hard. And I think this is very important. We need to open our arms to everybody. Social media is big, and we need to use it to bring more people in. And this rests on the riders and the organizers to make those committees.
Enrique.
Hi, good night to everybody. My question is regarding, or where is our sport going, in the sense that some time ago, when you go to, or when you went to an international show, there was 3 classes in the day. You go and you went and you took your speed horse for the lower class, you took a medium horse for a meter 45 or meter 50 class, and then you took your Grand Prix horse to do the Grand Prix in the weekend. And every single class you showed at was exciting, because you knew you were taking a meter 40 speed horse to run every day in a class, and a medium horse to do the small Grand Prix and ride the other 2 classes. Today, you go to the shows, and the first 2 or 3 days in the shows are really boring. 60% of the riders go in the ring to train with their horses to prepare for the Grand Prix. And that becomes a circle. How do we want the media and the sponsors to come when we are using the show to train, just preparing for the big class? So where is our sport going? Are we gonna end up like the Formula One, where we are only gonna have training sessions on Thursday and Friday and just a big race on Sunday? And we are not gonna be able to keep sponsors in our sport if the shows keep going in that direction. So how do you see that coming?
Should we go to George first on that one? Your thoughts, George?
That's a very good point, but getting back to that nice lady and Danny's question, I had 2 horses at the University of Virginia, and in Middleburg I found this 3-year-old by Bon Nuit, the Jim Twist line, and I called my father. I said, Daddy, I've got to have this green horse. He said, great, you got to have that green horse. Who is going to pay for it? And that, going into all sports, but especially this sport, from time immemorial, that is a big factor. Who is going to pay for it? I was also an actor in New York City for a couple of years. Those kids, most of them had no money. They had to pay for singing lessons, acting lessons, fencing lessons, all kinds of, they had to pay. They worked 2, 3, 4 jobs, 24/7 to pay for it. Somebody has to pay for it.
Okay. Should we just go back to the question from Enrique as well?
Yeah, then we have just got 2 more questions. We have those 2 out here, and then we'll wrap things up.
Who wants to jump in on Enrique's question? Max?
I think what Enrique says is true, but also, it has changed now to certain shows. You've got a rider that has only 1 horse, and he has to do that. To the point of view, if we end up like Formula One, we would be lucky, because Formula One is one of the most expensive and, great sports, in the world. So the reality is that you have to look at different situations. If you have a rider like McLean that can go to a show with 3 different horses, he will run in the meter 45. He will try to win the meter 50, and then he'll have his horse to win the Grand Prix.
Okay. You can do that.
And to Enrique question, I think that also comes with the increasing number of shows and events that, of course, gives more people possibility to be competing at the top level, and then it will go to what McLean and Leopoldo say about the Grand Slam or the majors. I think we cannot treat, even if we have, I think we have now more than 60 or 75 star events, there is no way that all of them are going to be able to attract all the sponsors. So you go to a show like Olympia, every class is important. Everybody gets there to compete. You have a few events in Spruce Meadows. Everybody gets there to compete in most of the classes. So I think the number of events has the benefit of letting more people be able to participate in the sport, but also create the problem you're saying.
Okay.
Give me a chance. Enrique, our experience, for example, 25 years ago when I arrived into Spruce Meadows with a speed horse, you can take it there one speed horse and you competing without problem 3 or 4 times. Now, every class is near of a Grand Prix, but this is the riders force us to do that. But every time we do a speed class, the riders don't compete, they go to train, and the sponsors don't want to put the money. The other thing is the parkours. We have every kind of natural fences, and we use less and less and less. Why? The riders don't want to jump it. I don't know what is the reason, but we are forcing to finish with this. And this class, years ago, take it more crowd and more public, even than the Grand Prix too, sometimes.
Okay, 2 questions over here, and then we have to go, and then we're going to go to our closing statement. Peter, we might get to you, so depending how.
Hi, how are you? I just have one comment that I think we all need to reflect on. You know, we talk about our sport, and I feel like a lot of these topics we've talked about are only focusing on the very top part of the sport. And when you talk about a sport, for me, it involves every person that likes to ride a horse. And for me, the biggest disconnect, with my opinion, is that every single person in the panel said the sport is growing. And in my mind, the sport is dying. So right there, for me, I think there's a big disconnect. So I understand they say the sport is growing because there's a segment of the sport that is growing, and it is the international competitions. Every time more amateur riders want to be in the international scene and do FEI shows. However, there's less riders doing the sport altogether. If you look at federation numbers, if you look at statistics, we have a we barely survive, meaning the same people that stop doing the sport, we're not cultivating enough people to replace them. So I think it's something we have to think about, because unless we do the sport more accessible to more people, we're not going to cultivate riders that are going to, at the end, be part of this big sport. And so that's my biggest comment, or my biggest opinion about the sport nowadays. I don't know if you guys have thought about it or not.
McLean's going to come in there.
Chris, I mean, you were the head of our federation for a while. Are the numbers going down in membership or up?
Well, it depends on how you get the numbers, but
Numbers of hunter-jumper members.
but certainly the numbers are, they were stagnant for a while, and now they've been going up a little bit.
Yeah, so I don't think that's 100% true. I definitely think there needs always to be addressed a balance of addressing the grassroots with the high end, right? I mean, it's always finding that balance. You're absolutely correct, but I think the amount of people doing it has grown, and those people that are going into the international level are coming from somewhere. You know, there are more people competing in whether it be Wellington or Ocala from South America than ever before. It's doubling every year. You know, that has to reflect that there's a great base wanting to do, you know, to move up through the ranks of the sport and compete. I mean, these people are coming from somewhere. So I think the balance to addressing the needs of both segments and all levels of our sport is very important. But I don't think there's less and less people doing it. I'd have to disagree with that.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you for your time this evening. I think you've enlightened us all with your comments and suggestions and stories of history. And I'd like to add my 2 cents as somewhat of a newcomer to the sport. One thing that I've noticed, my background is more corporate America, and that there is a huge gap between corporate America, sponsorship, the money that comes in from those avenues, versus the organic funding that is done within the sport. And I think, as Lucy had pointed out earlier, I think there's a huge, huge opportunity, untapped opportunity in the corporate segment to bring more dollars into the sport, to elevate the top athletes to the top end of the sport, where they're competing and showing the world what good riding is about, and giving the opportunity for people to become trainers that are good trainers on horses and good athletes that ride the horses, and people to promote the growth within the industry. I think that we need to develop the commercialism of the sport to develop the personalities of the riders, just like NASCAR did with Dale Earnhardt and the different drivers. We have amazing stories with Ian and McLean and all of our international riders. They all have a unique story that got them here, and there's things that within each of their lives that people can relate to that brings new people to the sport. I think we need to look at the sport from the top down, that right now we have Rolex and Longines as the two major sponsors for the sport. However, there's so many more opportunities for corporate sponsors to be engaged. We talked a little bit about the athletes, keeping them segmented, say, from the corporate sponsor as a corporate team. However, I feel that there's every reason in the world that the top riders should be sponsored by a corporation, that they could have the unlimited funding to provide the resources for their training, for their mounts, for travel and so forth. And that if we look to promote these riders at that level, that the corporate sponsors will come. If you look at the clientele that's at these events every week, week in and out, week out, wherever you are in the world, it's the most highest power corporate decision makers. And the problem is we don't give them an opportunity for them to be with each other. We don't have corporate suites where they can entertain their clients and bring these people like they do in golf. And those are the things that we need to do in order to promote the sport and to bring television and more eyes and more people to the sport.
Peter Leone, speak up, and while we're going to get a microphone to this young lady, and then we do have to wrap it up. So, Peter, go ahead. You can talk without a microphone, right?
Super quick.
It's coming.
Great things have been said here tonight, and I won't spend time on them. Enrique, really quick. One of the things that inspired riders and Chef de Keeps to have their riders compete day 1, day 2, day 3 was something called a Leading Rider Award and a Team Championship. I can't remember the last time I competed or watched a show that had a team championship. And that encourages the chef and the riders to go, some member of each country's team to go out and compete. Maybe that would make a difference for Wednesday and Thursday and so forth. What I really wanted to say is a big picture comment about why we're all here, and I encourage everyone in the room to think about it, especially the panel. And the two big warring factors that sometimes feed in a good way upon each other, but most often in a way that is a negative against each other, is the business of show jumping versus the sport of show jumping. And when you look at those two things, the three things that I want everyone to think about is 1, the good of the horse, 2, the growth of participation, and 3, the product that will actually engage and bring about corporate and spectators and support for the sport. The business of show jumping, if you think about it, show management, multiple weeks, multiple rings in the same venue, versus the good of the sport, different venues, different weeks, variety, and so on and so forth. So I just want to encourage all of us to really think through those two warring factors. I mean, all of the things that we talked about, and even the things that we haven't talked about yet, are critical. But if you filter them through that, the two warring factors of the business of show jumping versus the sport of show jumping. And I just wanted to get people thinking about that.
Thank you, Peter.
You go one time then.
One more question, I'll keep it quick. They make movies about horses, not about people. So the marketing, I think, is really critical. And in working with sponsors and coming from a horse standpoint, you look at your fan base. My question is, who should be the responsible party? What are the next action steps for our industry to prove that we are good to horses? our sports, our horses are having fun. With the difficulty that keeps going, we make it more complicated to educate. So who's responsible for the marketing of our sport to show the sponsors and then to educate the officials on what they need to know in terms of horse show welfare?
Okay, who would like to jump in on that one? Lucy was the one I was going to go to.
Oh, great. I think that there's definitely, as you know, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, social media, the riders themselves have to get more involved, showing, you know, what they're doing, educating. That's such an easy way, just at a basic minimum to start, but I also think that at times our governing bodies get very bogged down in the details of how to make the sport relatable, accessible, understandable by changing this format, you know, that venue, etc. If we spent more time promoting the athletes and the stories, as I said before, I think that that would already bring in more people, and then they can learn about the existing sport. I think changing the sport to make it more accessible is kind of a backwards way. I think the more we promote the athletes and horses, you know, at that level and through those bodies, or with the support and help of those bodies, the more people will be able to get involved and see.
Thank you, Lucy. Last comment or question, Bob?
Well, it's a comment and a few questions. Well, basically, after hearing everyone, I think Calgary Spruce Meadows have a lot of answers of what we talked today about it. And I think if we look back on all the topics that we talked today, there is a lot of answers in the way that Spruce Meadows have taken the sport. The other thing is about Daniel. I think, I don't know if here a middle-class kid can make it to the top of the sport, but I'm sure in Europe it will be more easier for a middle-class kid than here. And the other thing is, I don't know, but I want to know if Ian went double clear when they have 100 faults in that championship.
Thank you very much. So, final thoughts. Let's start at this end, Guy, and we're going to go right down to the table. And again, thank you very, very much for being a part of this very important production. Everyone's going to comment, and the first round of drinks are on BZ tonight after the party.
So I want to thank Cesar once more for the idea. Thank everybody for coming. My colleagues here at the panel. I think the attendance here shows one thing that for me is very good, is that we are all together on trying to make the sport better. I think all of us in our different holes in the sport, we woke up and we tried to make the sport better. Show organizers, riders, grooms, officials, media, sponsors, we all try to make it better, and that's what I think it's a bright light for, that we are all together on this. Thank you.
Okay, Ian.
I couldn't agree more, and I think one of the benefits we have right now is the vast majority of people in the sport are willing to give and to help the sport. Again, witnessed your presence here tonight, and I find the comments and questions very, very interesting that came from you. I go back to my original thought. I think this model has to go across the world. And with the abilities today of social media, we can all follow it, and the ideas that can come from this are quite phenomenal. And I respect you for coming up with this, my friend.
I look forward to the European round. Julia Reed.
Well, thank you, Cesar. Definitely what is needed is way more communication. There's so much potential here for growth. So the more communication, the better.
Okay, McLean. I'm going to use the few seconds to answer two thoughts I had about the two last questions for the lady.
In the end, we are ultimately responsible for promoting in the right way that our horses' lives and stories is better in sport. We are responsible for the lives they have, the care they have, and I learned this from George more than anybody. I have no doubt through the care in my stable that my horses' lives are far better than the ones in the backyards. You know, I have no doubt that their care and their life and the efforts put forward to them are at the utmost of the job that can be done. But we need to show the world that and show the world those stories. As far as your comment, Pablo, I would agree in the past and maybe even still today, the way forward for a talented young rider and is easier road in Europe, but it's changing fast. Europe is going plunging over the cliff of the American or the North American system, pay to play. We've been there, and we're trying to come back a little bit. We're trying to find ways to make it a little bit more economical, produce opportunities, be able to have opportunities where professionals and businesses such as Max's or George's in the past, or many of the other people in this room can provide opportunities for young riders. And the pendulum is swinging there. Right now, to go to those good shows in Europe, the economic success of the American young riders is nothing compared to what those people are having to do. So I think that that's a hard road, but at least we've hit that wall in North America and are trying to figure out a solution.
Lisa Davis.
Yeah, I guess thanks everyone for coming and listening, and I agree this should be expanded globally. Just one comment on the business versus sport. I do agree that it should be something we reflect on, but I think that a lot of other sports have been able to merge the two and have not lost sight of sport in growing the business around it. So I just hope that we can get inspiration there and amongst ourselves to move it forward that way.
Moving on to George.
Great evening. Thank you, Caesar, for getting us all together. This is not a sport. This is an art. Variety is the spice of life. Action speaks louder than words. I want to see action.
Okay, great. Leopoldo.
Cesar, thank you for what you did. Fantastic, and I think this need to repeat or doing as a tradition or something here in this circuit and encouraging in other places to do it. And I have something in my mind now. Thank you for Peter Leon to take it this subject that we need to balance with the business and the sport. This is one of the biggest issues that we need to balance. Today, I think we are too much in the size of the business. I think the business needs to continue, but we need to come to the sport too.
Okay, Max.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cesar, for organizing this. I think it's remarkable that we can all sit down in this room and talk freely and healthy about the issues that we can see happening in the sport and how can we resolve them. And I think this has to be done more often, and the panel needs to switch to all of you. We're all in the same boat, and all we want to do is try to improve the sport for the benefit of all of us. So thank you for coming. And
thank you very much, Max. Ladies and gentlemen, one quick thing. Before we adjourn, one quick thing. And he wasn't a panelist here tonight, but he was the subject of a lot of discussion, and he would like to have a comment. John Madden.
So I'm John Madden, and thank you very much for coming. I think this is a fantastic event. I am now retired from most of my duties in the FEI, but I'm still involved in a couple things. And I just want to reflect to you all that this is very valuable. The president of the FEI, Ingmar de Vos, asked me to attend here tonight and report back to him. So this is not futile at all. I think it's very valuable. I took notes on all of the comments that were made. And as a very positive thing, I'm not going to go through it all now, but from many other forums and many other discussions, many of the thoughts that we heard here tonight are very similar and already being worked on in a lot of ways. It moves much more slowly than we'd ever like to see, but I think a forum like this is valuable. It's not controversial, and it's reinforcing the efforts that the FEI is making in every one of these areas that you're talking about. The FEI can't do it themselves. With all of your help, and as Ian said, and as all the panelists said, with everybody's interest in here, I think it's really valuable to keep giving the input back and to help guide the governing body as to how to keep improving the sport. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Well, I think, Pete, that takes us into a thank you very much, doesn't it? So let's...
yes, it does.
Let's, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to our whole panel here,
Thank
as
you.
you've already done. Thank you so
Very,
much.
very much.
As they have. Thank you, Cesar. And just a reminder to you, there are some hors d'oeuvres, I think, on the way, so you don't need to go too far. You can have a little discussion between yourselves. And thank you very much for coming.